If you're wondering where to rank the new QBs after we got a fresh batch of rookies, we're here to help you out. I'm Jagger May, and that's Jeff Bell, and this is the Football Guys Dynasty Show. We are going to rank and tier the current quarterbacks. We'll try to discuss where we think some of these rookies might fall in here as we go through the tiers, but we're going to keep it to current quarterbacks only. We're going to start from the bottom up, from the F tier. Notable mentions, we have Deshaun Watson, Kirk Cousins, Will Levis. Will Levis, probably a backup. Kirk Cousins, probably a backup. Deshaun Watson should be a backup. That is it. Even if Deshaun Watson is a starter, I feel like it's safe to say that is an asset you just don't want to have. Correct, Jeff?
Well, I think you're punting this upcoming season for Deshaun Watson, given the Achilles injury that just re-injured that popped up. So that's kicking that can down the road. And I do think Kirk Cousins is going to be a week one starter. I tend to think he's going to be a week one starter for the Browns. But again, there's a lot of questions. He's got to show a lot of recovery off of his own Achilles injury and the poor play. Levis, I'm more on the side of, I think that his contract allows the Titans to keep him around as a backup. So
I mean, if they think their window is open, which it is, they just need some defensive help, and quarterback play. It's kind of in their their best interest to keep them. I don't know how much their out is or where they
might trade him for like a fifth or something like that, just on somebody that wants to take a chance on grabbing that rookie contract for maybe they were high on him 2 years ago. But
yeah, that makes sense. We'll move to our F tier where we have Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Justin Fields, Sam Darnold, Matthew Stafford, and Geno Smith. This is the old guys, and maybe they can be starters. I really don't want any of these. I have a lot of Justin Fields. I have some Sam Darnold. I arguably want them more than anything else in this tier, and I think the rankings kind of reflect that since we have Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers so low. We kind of talked about this briefly, like what is Aaron Rodgers? I mean, I think he should retire. It's in his best interest for him to retire at this point.
Yeah, that certainly, I don't know where he's going to be a starter. And we kind of offline, we ran through potential places where he could be a starter. I mean, maybe the Jets might be the most likely place he could be a starter. And you're talking about that seems a little bit far-fetched at this point. So those questions are out there on him. I mean, Matthew Stafford threw around a little bit of, he's kind of the last couple of years thrown around a little bit of retirement talk. I think he's entering a little bit of a contract negotiation coming up. Maybe he could decide to walk away. I don't know. There's a lot of question marks about this tier where you're dealing with, is Russell Wilson going to be a starting quarterback moving forward? Is Derek Carr going to recover off of his injuries and be a starting quarterback? Or is the team going to give Justin Fields a chance? Or Sam Darnold, I feel like, is almost the one that should ascend out of this tier, but he's entering free agency and we don't know where he's going to end up.
Yeah, and we've talked about it. Like, we're working on the rookie guide right now. So even making landing spots for some of these guys are difficult because right now, some of the best landing spots for players to go where there's a need, we don't know who their coach is. Just now for the Patriots, we know who their offensive coordinator is, which worries me for what kind of receivers that they're going to target. I don't feel great right now, Jeff, FYI. So right now, it's just this is a tier that you're kind of holding a couple of guys or you're doing your best to move on. Like, I'll hold Fields, I'll hold Darnold, I'll hold Wilson. But if I can get anything for Rodgers, if I can get anything for especially Stafford, who's hot right now, I would really, really want to move on from them. Same thing for Geno Smith. I mean, we joked about, again, pre-show. I mean, Mike McDonald was just like, I guess he's my starter. That doesn't feel good at all after, especially when they had struggles. And especially when I don't even think it's Geno Smith's fault that they were that bad. So.
Yeah, and we saw the yardage ended up there, but obviously the touchdowns did not. He wasn't a solid, consistent, high-end fantasy contributor. And to be clear, Jameis Winston is only in this tier because I'm just never going to quit Jameis Winston, even though it does seem like most of the rest of the NFL has quit Jameis Winston.
Yeah, he's like, I will say he's a priority backup. He can go in and win you a game. He can also be the reason you lose a game, but it's better than having Jacoby Brissett or something. that's not. It's going to give you
I
nothing.
have a dream of a fever vision of an offense of like George Pickens and Jameis Winston and just bombing the ball and just kind of create almost like, well, you're an Arkansas fan, so like Nolan Richardson's like 48 minutes of heck basically where they just run and
Mm,
press like nonstop, just
yep.
like make like the football version of that and just like make shit crazy and throw the ball all over the place.
It's like it'll be like a budget greatest show on turf. It's like it's an
Yes.
affordable show on turf. Oh, as we move on to our D tier, we have Bryce Young, Tua Tagovailoa, Anthony Richardson, J.J. McCarthy, Dak Prescott, Michael Penix Jr.'s. These are all starters or presumed starters, but with a lot of questions. Obviously, Bryce Young, I like what I saw of him. I'm going to try to buy Bryce Young when I can. Tua's he's like the T Higgins of quarterbacks. Yeah, he's productive, but he just seems frustrating. And T Higgins is at least a wide receiver and has Joe Burrow. But how long is Mike McDaniel going to be there at this point next season? There's just a lot of red flags there. Anthony Richardson, as someone who's been a huge fan, is he going to take the next step? JJ McCarthy, it goes up more and more that he's going to be the starter every day. Especially, he had another one of those press conferences where Kevin O'Connell was just like, Sam Darnold, we like him. I hope he's safe out there. Someone's going to get a great guy. We wish him luck. So it feels like JJ is going to be their guy.
It's almost it's the elevator tier where these guys are either going to go up or they're going to go down, and you're not quite sure which direction they're going to go. But the potential is there for any of these players if Dak Prescott bounces back half healthy. If we ever feel better about Tua Tagovailoa's health, Tyreek Hill had that disappointing season, and we don't know that we feel as confident about the weapons in Miami as maybe we did kind of walking into this year, or these young quarterbacks that just like you ran through that could go any direction.
Yeah. And it's Bryce Young is like, yeah, we like the stock, but it was that last 4 weeks. And the same thing with Michael Penix. It almost worries me that Michael Penix didn't take over faster. And I know he looked all right the 2 or 3 games that we saw him in, but Kirk looked bad a lot. And you had to think, you think it's more a sunk cost fallacy they threw him out there, or do you think Michael Penix truly wasn't ready at that time? Maybe both.
I don't call it sunk cost fallacy. I think it's leaning to Kirk Cousins did have a good window from about week 3-ish to about week 8 or so. He had decent play. I think it less sunk cost fallacy and more, this guy is maybe an off the field leader. We know what Kirk Cousins has brought to this organization. We want to show him respect that he signed here instead of just yanking him out for the rookie and just waiting in reality too. First year head coach. He'd been a head coach previously, but a first year for Falcons head coach coming in there, Raheem Morris, and being the coach there. Questions about maybe his standing and how he's going to handle this team and throwing it all to a rookie.
Yeah. I didn't have a first round grade on Michael Penix as a quarterback, but the stuff happens, and I thought he had a lot to clean up. I'll buy Michael Penix for sure. And a lot of this tier I would try to buy. I'd try to buy J.J. McCarthy. If you need a quarterback, I would try to buy Dak Prescott, Bryce Young. Anthony Richardson is where it gets weird. So how much are you paying for Anthony Richardson, and what's the state of your roster at that point? But this is a fun tier to shop in if you need something. Um, are you buying, like, would you buy Anthony Richardson, or are you just kind of staying off of him?
Well, in one of our listener leagues, a listener offered me a trade. I gave him Kyle Pitts and I got Anthony Richardson. So that was a superflex league. So that was kind of one of those of like, yeah, sure. At the cost of Kyle Pitts, I'll throw a dart here on Anthony Richardson. You have to kind of acknowledge that if Richardson turns it around or if Richardson gets very hot, we know the fantasy potential is definitely there. And that out of this entire group, outside of maybe JJ McCarthy and just being the unknown and that support system in Minnesota, Anthony Richardson, Michael Penix probably too, has the potential to climb highest out of this entire tier.
Yeah. And what's wild for me is there's some things I didn't like where he's losing the locker room, but I worry about Shane Steichen. It did, like, and the Colts in general. It just does not sound very fun over there. And like you said, I'm holding him. The only share that I've sold, it's because I bought Brian Thomas Jr. and I ended up getting like Dak Prescott back in a package. So I sold high. You know, I didn't just sell for peanuts or anything like that. Moving on to our C tier. This is another, if you can shop in this tier, do so, but it's starting to get expensive. We have Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, Bo Nix. One that sticks out, Jeff, you and I are probably still ahead of consensus on Kyler Murray and Trevor Lawrence. Uh, I mean, a lot of people are just done with Kyler Murray, and I think that's just silly at this point, just to be done with him. You know, I
Yeah.
think he's a rushing Jared Goff quarterback, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. And I think that maybe they move on for Drew Petzing, maybe they try some new things, but I think that offense has room to grow, and Kyler Murray can go back to being Kyler Murray. Trevor Lawrence, I've been buying. I'm not gonna lie, I was hoping Ben Johnson would go there. Would you like Trevor Lawrence if Cliff Kingsbury went there?
Cliff, we've talked about Cliff Kingsbury
I
before,
know.
obviously.
I know.
We're very excited about what he was able to do with Jane Daniels and his sojourn to, was it Thailand he went to, or whatever happened there where he reset his mind, whatever it might have been. Um, I guess you're okay. You're excited because maybe it's a young offensive minded head coach that you would hope that would be there. But we did see the offensive minded head coach in Doug Peterson flame out. So, it would not be Ben Johnson level excitement. That's certainly for sure. But I guess there are worse areas that they could go with.
Yeah, Liam Cohen is another one. I know I had a lot of concerns about Liam Cohen taking over after Dave Canales, but he seems to. It looks just fine to me, so I'd be very interested, specifically with that vertical offense that they ran in Tampa. I think that they have the perfect backfield for Travis Etienne to play that White role, Tank Bigsby in the Bucky Irving role. You got Brian Thomas Jr. They should draft more wide receivers. I don't hate Parker Washington. I don't hate Christian Kirk. I don't know what Evan Ingram is at this point. I think he might be a cap casualty. I think we've talked about this
Yeah,
before, but
going back to Trevor Lawrence, I just don't understand really the take around fantasy football with him, because it does
he's
seem
not
like
Peyton
there was
Manning.
right. It seems like there's just massive blowback from him not being the level of prospect that people thought, even though he ends up still being a top 12 quarterback in fantasy. When it's like he's a quarterback one in fantasy, he's still the very, very young portion of his career. And just because he's not what was built up when he was a rookie, he's quarterback 19 on keep trade cut. I mean, I'm buying all day on that.
Yeah, I don't think you no, you're not in the league. That's with like Dave Kluge and Alfredo. But I traded with Tyler Fuller. I was like, "You want the 102? Give me Trevor Lawrence." He gave it to me. I'm like, I hope Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders are Trevor Lawrence. You
Yeah.
know, like I hope that. So I felt really good not having that pick because I fixed the problem. You know, I drafted Anthony Richardson, had no QB2. So I was like, okay, I got Trevor Lawrence now. So now I have a QB1, and now I'm just praying that Anthony Richardson becomes something at that point. So
Yeah.
Kyler Murray, same thing. Another question here: we are off on Bo Nix. What is where are you with him? Why are you so low compared to the consensus?
I just think consensus is overreacting to 1 year. Similar to it's a smaller scale, but similar to what happened with CJ Stroud when people had him at Dynasty one, quarterback one last year. I just think I mean, certainly we're excited about what we saw from Bo Nix, but if he bands rebounds comes back a little bit, are you going to have like a big knee jerk reaction to push him down? And I think that goes back to maybe that Lawrence conversation a little bit, or where you're seeing some of these guys placed relative to, it's like the slightest little bit of excitement versus kind of the boring guy now that was exciting before, but we've seen put up stats over a number of years.
The only pushback for you, because I get what you're saying and why I'd have him above CJ Stroud, whereas you don't have him close, is the rushing floor. And that was my thing about CJ Stroud, where it's just like, I can't put him at QB1 because he's never going to be able to have the ceiling of Josh Allen, of Lamar Jackson, of even Jaden Daniels at that time. And with Bo Nix, even having that baby rushing bump, I'm willing to make that bet. And I don't know. Sean Payton seems to be happy when he has his guys. He was not happy with Russell Wilson. He's super happy with Bo Nix. All they need to do is nail the draft. Go get more weapons on offense. Go get a tight end and a wide receiver and figure it out. Maybe Troy Franklin catches on. Seems like Marvin Mims is he's starting to return some value on all that investment that we paid for him, because we were paying like 201 and 205 for him at the time because he had that second round draft capital.
Yeah, and I mean, he's still a 22-year-old player. So, and we did see some big flashes from him. It's just that, will they commit to going that direction? And again, how long is that run out window for Cortland Sutton to be a high end producer, or are they able to actually lock in another player there that can be the long term number one receiver there for Bo Nix? Maybe it is Marvin Mims, but that would be, I think, a fair question.
Mm-hmm. Right now I'm mocking Harold Fannin or Luther Burden, so some type of receiver, and then even double dipping in the second round, like receiver or tight end, because I just feel like they need to invest in their young player because that defense has been solid. So interesting perspective there. Now we move into our B tier. And this gets into where you're paying. They're still gettable. CJ Stroud, people are still sour on. Justin Herbert, right now is the time to buy Justin Herbert because people are saying like, oh, he's washed. Go out and go try to get Justin Herbert right now. He was very good. And what's crazy, Jeff, we watched the same game. We were there together watching that game. I distinctly watched, I think maybe that last interception was the only one that was his fault, and he was trying to make something happen. Quentin Johnston knocked one in the hands. Will Dissly did the same thing. People are box score watching. The Chargers are a team that I'm investing in heavily. Justin Herbert, I'm investing in. Ladd McConkey, we're in a draft together right now, our way early redraft. I drafted Ladd McConkey as my wide receiver 2 in the 4th round right away. If not wide receiver 1, I think. Maybe no 2, because I got A.J. Brown. I got him back to back on the turn. So that's someone I want. Then we got Drake May and Caleb Williams. We differ a little bit here. I'm higher on Drake May. You're higher on Justin Herbert. I can't hate on you for having Justin Herbert higher. It always comes back down to rushing for me. I'm not going to lie. The Josh McDaniels news, I don't love it. I don't love it.
Yeah. I guess realistically, what do you think Drake May's ceiling floor is for rushing? Because I know we've talked about it before with Drake May rushing relative to, you've mentioned it with Caleb Williams. I mean, Justin Herbert still ran for 300 yards last year, and Justin Herbert is not athletic quarterback. And so I just curious, like, do you think May's like a 700 type of rusher, or where do you think he kind of settles at?
I think he's closer to 500 because, like, to me, not on closer to the goal line, but the way that he plays football, it just reminds me of Josh Allen. He's not that physical a player, but the way he's willing to run, and the athleticism there, where I could realistically see him being a 500-yard rush. You got to think about it now. He was like 17 points per game with nothing going on. To me, with that floor, I think we've seen the floor. I think that ceiling of getting like over 20 points per game, or even like those Kyler Murray type game, the spike weeks we saw, maybe not the same, because I think Drake May has a lot more passing potential and not quite the rushing upside. But I think that's where I'm seeing him at. So if you get him a receiver and offensive line, that's what I'm buying into.
So
I'm a Pats fan.
Yeah, and kind of unpacking a little bit here and talking about rushing here at quarterback, because we certainly have you have the Aaron Rodgers and the Matthew Stafford, and if you're playing props, you see these quarterbacks that are listed week to week that are at like 0.5 rushing yards or like 2.5 rushing yards is their prop. Whereas like a Justin Herbert is closer to like 14 to 20 rushing yards is his prop, whereas Drake May is a little bit more like 22. I think once you start to walk into that tier, once you're way outside of the Jared Goff at 2.5 rushing yards for his prop, you're still dealing with layers of a rushing floor. And when you're talking about spike weeks or that ability, it's kind of you walk through. I mean, Drake May had a 95-yard rushing game, and that tells you Drake May can have a 95-yard rushing game, but most of the rest of his games are kind of in that 24 yards. Like that's 2.5 points, and that's kind of about where Herbert is too. And I think that it's one of those things that can you run? Yes or no? And if you can run,
Not how much, just like can you do it?
yeah, exactly. And there's Lamar Jackson and there's Jalen Hurts and there's Josh Allen over here that are on these high end offenses that are getting the tush push touchdowns or can rush for 1,000 yards. And Jaden Daniels, I mean, those are way over there. And then the opposite end, way at the other end, is the Matthew Stafford that I'm gonna bet 0.5 over, like he's gonna run the ball one time. And then I think there's just kind of the in between, and I do think that absent seeing more of that out of Drake May, out of Bo Nix versus a CJ Stroud versus a Justin Herbert, like it's there for all of them. And so you can get the 45 yards rushing and a touchdown off of any of those guys instead of, but I'm not counting on one of those guys getting shoved into the end zone 17 times in a season.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to give the caveat that's like Drake May is a skinny Josh Allen. Like until he goes to lower his shoulder on someone, he looks like Josh Allen, meaning that he never should lower his shoulder on anyone unless it's like Tyrann Mathieu, like a 5'8" type guy or something like that, So
yeah, because I mean, breaking it down, when you're talking the difference between a Justin Herbert rushing for 300 yards versus Drake May rushing for 500 yards, it's about 11 yards per game, which is about 1.1 point. You throw a couple extra touchdowns in there on top, but it's kind of, you're dealing with layers there.
And caveat here, I made my rankings yesterday. Caleb Williams would be probably closer to our next tier now that I know Ben Johnson was there. Like Chicago was doing way too much foolishness there for a little bit where I had to figure out what they were going to do. Like once they got Ben Johnson, I'm fine. Yeah.
I think it's ludicrous to have Caleb Williams behind Bo Nix, behind CJ Stroud, behind Drake May. Like it's just going too far. Considering where Caleb Williams was valued last year, you look at having Rome Odunze there, having DJ Moore there, now having Ben Johnson there, and look at actually what he did put up numbers wise as a rookie. I just think it's way reactionary, way knee-jerk reactionary on Caleb Williams.
Well, this is like the wins are a QB stat thing. At the end of the day, it's like, well, look what Jaden Daniels did with this. I'm like, okay, man, but like Cliff Kingsbury is like infinitely better than Shane Waldron, which is wild because I've been I was like one of the biggest Cliff Kingsbury haters and like Kev Masurgia, and I'm like, maybe I should apologize, because he's doing enough. So.
Well, it's Intel Sleeper gives me my the ability to add 15 points for a quarterback win. I mean, I don't really care. It's like,
yeah,
putting up numbers. You're putting up numbers.
And this isn't a wide receiver episode, but Rome Odunze, I was just like, okay, so Rome Odunze is worth a 1-on-1 for me now. To be, I may sound wild to you guys, but if I need a wide receiver, I'm at least trading back that 1-on-1 and trading that 1-on-1 to get Odunze plus or something like that. At this point, I'm way in. Our next tier: Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts. It's congrats, you got a really good QB, but they're not as zoomy or big and brawny and get all the touchdowns as the other guys. I've written an article about this that until further notice, I don't see Patrick Mahomes ever falling outside of like the top 5 QBs for me. You have him at QB7, but I mean, like, who do you have ahead at this point. Joe Burrow, and
I have
that's his
Caleb Williams
weapons that
ahead of
he.
him.
You have
So
Caleb Williams, and I get it. I get it. Yeah, it's Patrick Mahomes has to throw a lot. I know he does run guys, but it's kind of like what Jeff was saying. He's more of a Matthew Stafford. He's gonna get you a couple of times, but you really don't want him doing that type thing. Joe Burrow is just gonna throw an F ton. They love T Higgins. They love Jamar Chase. They could still Eric Gall's okay. He still could be something, but this tight end class is so good. They could draft someone right now and upgrade it and be good. Really, they should focus on defense. Jalen Hurts, I feel like he gets a lot of unfair criticism. A lot of people don't like him. I think he's just fine. I don't know, especially for fantasy. It's like you said, like Jeff, like he runs the ball. He gets the ball to good guys and gets touchdowns. What more do I want?
yeah, I think one of I and I apologize. I wish I could credit it correctly, but I saw somebody tweet that like basically how would we view Jalen Hurts without fantasy football's existence of like if you were just looking at a raw football level versus so much of the lens of what we do of the who we interact with what we see is that fantasy football lens, which in that lens Jalen Hurts is an elite player because he's getting shoved into the end zone 15 times in a season and he'll occasionally hit a deep pass to AJ Brown. But I mean, since September, they've basically kind of treated him as Trent Dilfer when it comes to the passing game of basically just get the ball to Saquon Barkley and don't screw it up. And you get close, we'll push you into the end zone. So that's where the separation between that keeps him out of the next tier for me. But again, that really he scores a lot of fantasy points. He sets up very, very well to score a lot of fantasy points. And I
And
mean,
the Eagles
Burrow,
like
we
him.
know the Eagles like him very much for the time being until the city decides, Philadelphia decides they hate him. But in Burrow, I mean, we saw him push through with volume and he still didn't get up to Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. So that's where it's kind of, I mean, if you lock this in every single year for Joe Burrow that he's going to do this and lead the NFL in passing yards and lead the NFL in touchdowns, and he's still quarterback 3 in fantasy, then you're kind of that's what you're looking at, and kind of the low end of that is quarterback 8-ish range, or being what Patrick Mahomes is this year, where he's quarterback 11 and people are angry with him because he's not quarterback 2, and so and you're kind of dealing here with Burrow and Mahomes. We know they have that upside. We know that they could throw for 5,000 yards in a year, 50 touchdowns in a year, but we also know that absent that, they're kind of back in the quarterback ones.
Yeah, it's like, we'll move on to our S tier, which is the obvious guys um, that you guys could expect: Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jane Daniels. Obviously, if you got some of these guys, you're doing great. But really, if you have anyone within our top 15, and one QB, you're fine. In Superflex, if you have a combination of these two, you're really comfortable. And that's why I try to double dip early and figure everything else. That's why I made that big trade for you to get Bo Nix. It is not fun worrying about quarterback, guys. It's just not fun having that worry, and it gets expensive in Dynasty. So that's why I'm willing to pay extra for some of them, so I don't have to worry about it, because that's like, okay, now I can go fix wide receiver. I can go fix these other things at this point. Um, and yeah, and it's, I think, like you said, Jalen Hurts in a fantasy lens and on the, and from like the NFL lens, the same thing could be almost said in reverse, where sometimes with the fantasy lens, we hate on players and you just want the security. It's like people were hating on Joe Burrow. I'm like, Joe Burrow's job security should be baked into his value at some point, just because I know Joe Burrow is going to always have a job. Whereas like, I love Drake May, but is Drake May going to be the guy in, in 3 years? I can't honestly say that at this point. With Jaden Daniels, we feel that way. Lamar Jackson, we feel that way. Josh Allen, we feel that way. And Jeff, you talked about C.J. Stroud and how we pushed him up. With Jaden Daniels, with that rushing floor and what we've seen right now, it's comfortable saying that there's an argument that he could be ahead of Lamar Jackson at this point, and that's simply because of the years that you've bought back, right?
Yeah. And I think, to be honest, I think the only reason why he's not is because of how aggressive everybody got on CJ Stroud last offseason. And I think it's a little bit of blowback on, we don't want to get burnt twice. We don't want the Anthony Richardson situation where people were putting him as a top 10 or even higher quarterback in fantasy or that. And so it's just that layer of caution of recognizing, like, okay, we know that Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are going to be Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, and we feel good that there are at least 5 to 10 years of them left of still being those players. So are you going to sell that discount basically and just go in on Jaden Daniels, where if you do get high end Jaden Daniels, then you're getting Lamar Jackson basically. It's kind of one of those things of, where are you going to, that safety of having the established track record versus that risk of it being another Anthony Richardson situation, or the wheels falling off, or even the CJ Stroud situation where it's probably not quite as bad as everybody made it out to be, but it's just not the where everybody thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. Well, that's the quarterbacks, guys. Throughout the rest of the season, we're going to hit every position slowly but surely. Then up until April, a big part of our focus is going to be the rookie guide. So, as always, I should have done this earlier. Like, subscribe, leave us a comment if you have any questions. You think me and Jeff are crazy for leaving your favorite QB out of the S tier. Just let us know and go to footballguys.com. And you guys want to sign up because, like we said, our first version of that rookie guide is free. That's one of the biggest things that me and Jeff do, specifically for Dynasty. And you go into that rookie draft season, it's one of the most helpful tools that we'll have for you. So as always, I'm Jagger May. That's Jeff Bell. We love you, and we'll see you guys on the next one.